What would you do if your 7-year-old child looked up at you from a hospital bed and told you that Jesus had been sitting beside him all night? Would you believe him? Or would you do what his father did and walk out of the room to cry alone in a hallway because he didn't know if his son was going to live to see the next morning? This is that story, and I need you to hear it. His name was Eli. Eli James Harmon. 7 years old, with big brown eyes and a laugh that could fill an entire room. His mother, Sandra, always said he laughed like his grandfather, from deep in his belly, without a single care in the world. He loved baseball. He loved scrambled eggs. He loved sneaking the dog onto his bed at night and pretending he didn't know how she got there. He was the kind of kid who made you believe that the world was still good. And then one Tuesday morning in October, Sandra went to wake him for school, and he wouldn't get up. At first she thought he was just being stubborn. He'd been doing that lately, stretching his morning routine, pretending to be asleep. She laughed and shook his shoulder. But Eli didn't move. She shook him again. "Eli, baby, come on, sweetheart." Nothing. The ambulance came in 11 minutes. Those were the longest 11 minutes of Sandra's life. She stood over her little boy in the doorway of his bedroom, his baseball trophies on the shelf, his half-built Lego set on the floor, and she prayed the only prayer she could get out. Please, please, please. At the hospital, the doctors used words she'd never heard before, words that didn't sound real, a rare neurological condition, swelling in the brain. They weren't sure yet what had caused it. They weren't sure about a lot of things. What they were sure about was this. Eli was in critical condition. His father, Mark, drove 70 miles an hour to get to that hospital. He ran through the doors with his tie still half knotted from work. When he saw Sandra in the waiting room, the look on her face, something inside him just broke. Mark was a quiet man, a practical man. He'd grown up in a home where you fix things with your hands, not your prayers. He believed in God, sure, in the distant way that a lot of people do. The way you believe in something without really leaning on it. But standing outside his son's room that first night, listening to the machines breathe for his little boy, Mark Harmon realized something terrifying. He had nothing to lean on. The doctors had no clear answers. The treatment was experimental. And every time he walked into that room and saw Eli, pale, still, so impossibly small in that bed, Mark felt a helplessness so deep it made him sick. Days passed. Eli didn't wake up. Sandra barely left the hospital. She sat beside Eli's bed and read to him from the Bible, even though she didn't know if he could hear. She read Psalms. She read the stories of healing, the blind man, the leper, the little girl that Jesus raised from the dead. She read them out loud because she needed to hear them herself. She needed to remember that miracles were real. Mark would come every evening after work, sit for an hour, and then step outside. He couldn't explain why. Something about being in that room with Eli feeling so still made him feel like he was already grieving, and he wasn't ready to do that. He was not ready. On the 9th night, one of the nurses, a woman named Clara, stopped him in the hallway. She was older, soft-spoken, with kind eyes. "You doing okay, Dad?" she asked. Mark shook his head. "You believe in prayer?" she asked. He looked at her for a long moment. "I don't know anymore." She nodded, like that was a perfectly honest answer. "You don't have to know," she said. "You just have to be willing." He didn't know what to do with that. He went home, sat in Eli's empty bedroom, and for the first time in as long as he could remember, he cried. Mark didn't have beautiful words that night. He didn't have a pastor's prayer or a scripture verse or anything that sounded like faith. He sat on the floor of his son's room with Eli's baseball glove in his hands, and he just talked. He talked to God like a man out of options, like a man with nothing left. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. I don't know how to trust you when it feels like everything is falling apart. I don't know how to be strong for Sandra. I don't know how to walk into that room one more time." He pressed the baseball glove to his chest. "But I'm asking you. I am begging you. Please don't take my son. Please. He's 7 years old. He hasn't even had a chance to live yet. And I know I haven't been the man I should have been. I know I've kept you at a distance. But if you're real, if you're really there, then please, let him wake up. Let my boy come home." He stayed on that floor for a long time, and he didn't hear a voice. No thunder, no light from heaven, just the quiet of an empty house and the low hum of the refrigerator downstairs, and the feeling, strange and unfamiliar, that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't quite as alone in that room as he'd thought. He went back to the hospital the next morning. On the 11th day, Eli opened his eyes. It was 5:47 in the morning. Sandra was asleep in the chair beside his bed, her Bible still open in her lap, and Eli just woke up. He looked around the room slowly, like someone returning from a long journey. Then he looked at his mother and said in a small, hoarse voice, "Mama." Sandra woke up like lightning had struck her. She was out of that chair and beside him before she was even fully awake, her hands on his face, her tears already falling. "Baby, baby, I'm here. I'm right here." "I'm okay, Mama," Eli said. And then, and she would never forget this, he smiled. Calm, peaceful, like he had a secret. The doctors called it remarkable. One of them used the word unexplained. The swelling had reduced significantly overnight. His neurological responses were strong. They wanted to run more tests. They wanted to observe. But the shift in his condition was, in their own careful medical language, not what they had expected. Not what they had expected. Mark got to the hospital within 20 minutes of Sandra's call. He walked into that room and saw his son sitting up in bed, eating orange jello, and he had to grab the door frame to keep himself standing. "Hey, Dad," Eli said, like it was any normal morning. Mark couldn't speak. He crossed the room and pulled his son into his arms and just held him and shook, the way men do when they've been strong for too long and they finally get to let it go. Later that afternoon, when Eli was more awake and the doctors had come and gone again, Sandra asked him something she'd been turning over in her mind all morning. "Eli, honey, do you remember anything from when you were sleeping?" Eli got quiet. He looked down at his blanket and picked at a loose thread, the way he did when he was thinking hard about something. Then he looked up. "Someone was with me, Mama." Sandra felt the hair on her arms stand up. "What do you mean, baby?" "When everything was dark," Eli said slowly, "there was this man. He was sitting right there." He pointed to the chair beside the bed, the chair Sandra had barely left in 11 days. "He had kind eyes, real kind, and he talked to me." "What did he say?" Sandra whispered. Eli thought about it. "He said not to be scared. He said he was going to take care of you and Daddy. He said—" Eli paused, scrunched his nose the way he did when he was trying to remember exactly. He said, "It's not your time yet. Your family needs you." Sandra put her hand over her mouth. "And then he stayed with me," Eli continued, like he was describing something completely ordinary. "The whole time. He was just there. I wasn't scared even once." Mark was standing in the corner of the room. He hadn't moved in a full minute. "Who was it, buddy?" he finally managed. "Did he tell you who he was?" Eli looked at his dad with those big brown eyes, and he said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, the way only a child can say something that would bring a grown man to his knees. "It was Jesus, Dad. It was Jesus." Mark left the room. Not because he didn't believe it, because he did. He walked down the hallway and around the corner, and he stood by the window at the end of the ward, the one that overlooked the parking lot and the gray October sky, and he wept. He wept harder than he'd wept on the floor of Eli's bedroom, harder than he'd wept in his whole life, because he remembered that prayer. He remembered every broken, clumsy word of it, and he thought about a God who had been in that room with his son when Mark couldn't be. A God who had stayed through 11 days and 11 nights, sitting in that chair, holding a little boy in the dark so he wouldn't be afraid. That is the God Mark Harmon met that October. Not in a church, not in a sermon, but in the testimony of a 7-year-old boy eating orange jello in a hospital bed. Eli came home 3 weeks later. The doctors monitored him for months. The condition never returned. To this day, the medical team that treated him keeps his case in their files as one they cannot fully explain. Mark started going to church. Not because someone told him to, not because it was what you were supposed to do. He went because he was a man who had called out in the dark and heard something answer. And he wanted to know that voice better. Sandra framed a verse from Isaiah and hung it in Eli's room, right next to his baseball trophies. "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God." And Eli? Eli grew up. He's 14 now, and he still remembers. Some things you don't forget. Some mornings leave a mark on your soul that no amount of time can fade. He talks about it sometimes, not to show off, not to seem special. He talks about it the way you'd talk about something you just know is true, like the sun, like your mother's voice, like the feeling of coming home. He says he wasn't scared, not even once. Maybe you're watching this today and you're in your own dark room. Maybe you're sitting beside a hospital bed or staring at a phone waiting for a call that hasn't come, or lying awake at 3 in the morning wondering how you're going to make it through tomorrow. Maybe, like Mark, you've kept God at arm's length. Not because you don't believe, but because belief means trusting something you can't control. And that's the scariest thing there is. But I want you to hear what a 7-year-old boy experienced in a hospital room in October. You are not alone in the dark. You have never been alone in the dark. There is someone who sits with you in the quiet places, in the hard places, in the places where you can't feel anything except fear. And he is not going anywhere. He doesn't ask you to have perfect faith. He doesn't ask you to have the right words, or the right theology, or even the right heart. He just asks you to be willing. Even the most broken prayer reaches heaven. Even a man on his knees on his little boy's bedroom floor, holding a baseball glove with nothing left to offer, that prayer is heard. That prayer matters. God is not far away from you today. He is closer than the breath in your lungs and the heartbeat in your chest. So if you're hurting, cry out. Even if the words don't come, cry out. Even if all you have is please, that's enough. That has always been enough. Because the same Jesus who sat beside a little boy in a hospital room in the dark is with you right now. And he is not afraid of your dark. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. You never know whose dark room this might reach.